Alright, this is the second video in a short series on Derek Mann. This is one of my favorites. It's called Disused Shed in County Wexford. Um, doesn't need much more introduction than that. Has an epigraph here. Let them not forget us, the weak souls among the asphodels. I still have not read this poem. I just looked at it, probably not for the first time, but again turned away from it. It looked a little too long to do before this video, although I'm sure I'll be better for having read that at some point. Just like the last one, I'm going to do a read through and then I'll work my way through it and sort of annotate it out loud. A disused shed in County Wexford. Even now there are places where thought might grow. Peruvian minds worked out and abandoned to a slow clock of condensation. An echo trapped forever and a flutter of wildflowers in the lift shaft. Indian compounds where the wind dances and a door bangs with diminished confidence. Lime crevices behind rippling rain barrels, dog corners for bone burials, and a disused shed in County Wexford. Deep in the grounds of a burnt-out hotel, among the bathtubs and wash basins, 1,000 mushrooms crowd to a keyhole. This is the one star in their firmament, or frames a star within a star. What should they do there but desire? So many days beyond the rhododendrons, with the world waltzing in its bowl of cloud, they have learnt patience and silence, listening to the rooks chorus in the high wood. They have been waiting for us in a feeder of vegetable sweat since Civil War days, since the gravel-crunching, interminable departure of the expropriated mycologist. He never came back, and light since then is a keyhole rusting gently after rain. Spiders have spun, flies dusted to mildew, and once a day, perhaps, they have heard something. A trickle of masonry, a shout from the blue, or a lorry changing gear at the end of the lane. There have been deaths, the pale flesh flaking into the earth that nourished it, and nightmares, born of these in the grim dominion of stale air and rank moisture. Those nearest the door grow strong. Elbow room, elbow room. The rest, dim in a twilight of crumbling utensils and broken pitchers, groaning for their deliverance, have been so long expectant that there is left only the posture. A half century without visitors, in the dark. Poor preparation for the cracking lock and creak of hinges. Magi, moonmen, powdery prisoners of the old regime, web-throated, stalked like triffids, racked by drought and insomnia. Only the ghost of a scream at the flashbulb firing squad we wake them with shows there is life yet in their feverish forms. Grown beyond nature now, soft food for worms, they lift frail heads in gravity and good faith. They are begging us, you see, in their wordless way, to do something, to speak on their behalf, or at least not to close the door again. Lost people of Treblinka and Pompeii, save us, they seem to say. Let the God not abandon us who have come so far in darkness and in pain. We too had our lives to live. You with your light meter and relaxed itinerary, let not our naive labors have been in vain. It's cool every time I read it. That's a disused shed in County Wexford. Right off the bat, one of my favorite lines of all time. Even now, there are places where thought might grow. Um, we have this really interesting idea from the offset about hope in sort of abandoned places. Abandoned places. So you have this hope and abandonment play where he says there are places where thought might grow. I think the operative word, or one of them at least, is might. which lends itself here to this theme of hope. And again, hope in this sort of a abandoned setting. You have these Peruvian mines, totally abandoned. There's nothing but sort of like the dripping cadence of water, sort of keeping time. An echo trapped forever in a flutter of wildflowers in a lift shaft. Indian compounds where the wind dances and door bangs with diminished confidence. Dog corners for bone burials, and in a disused shed in County Wexford. So you have a list of these, a beautiful list of these different abandoned places. And the one that the poem is going to focus on is this disused shed in County Wexford. I should have done this homework before, but I'm pretty sure that's in Ireland. And it's just an abandoned shed. Again, we have this idea that there's hope in abandonment. Um, there are several places where this could happen, and he sort of shows a few examples here, but then the one we're going to zoom in on is this abandoned shed in the countryside. Deep in the grounds of a burnt out hotel among the bathtubs and wash basins, 1,000 mushrooms crowd to a keyhole. And if we have a protagonist or a subject, it's these mushrooms. You could sort of picture them in this shed, and you have light sort of coming through the keyhole, and then on the way on the inside, let's see if I can do this. You have that light sort of coming through, and all of the mushrooms seem to be sort of crowding that space, leaning towards the keyhole. This is the one star in their firmament. Another unbelievable line. It's the only source of light in this shed, or frames a star within a star. What should they do there but desire? I, I don't want to get too technical, but there's maybe like a hint there, but then this is really the line where it's very clear that he's going to personify these mushrooms. And if you think back again, I've done too much research on this, but let them not forget us. We have this epigraph sort of in the background, sort of just hovering as he develops this setting and some of these themes. Um, Again, let them not forget us. The sense of abandonment. Um, we'll keep an eye on weak souls. And there's this, at least for me, just thinking about it right now, there's this weird inversion where let them not forget us, the weak souls among the asphodels. He sort of flips it and thinks, even in this case, about, I know they're not technically plants, but he thinks about the mushrooms as weak souls themselves. That was a bad one. So many days beyond the rhododendrons, with the world waltzing in a bowl of cloud. Another great, great line. They have learnt patience and silence. Again, personification. Um, but this establishment too of of these really passive characters. Of course, they're fungi, so that shouldn't surprise us too much. But there seems to be this nobility that's being established in their patience, and maybe even a desperation here with the what should they do there but desire. Listening to the rook chorus in the high wood, excuse me. They've been waiting for us in a feeder of vegetable sweat since Civil War days, since the gravel crunching interminable departure. This is such a cool line. you could imagine these mushrooms listening to, um, he says, the expropriated mycologist. This sort of mycologist would be somebody who studies mushrooms. It's not clear whether or not, I think this is clearly a play where whoever left this shed last, they're referring to. Um, and, you sort of hear him walk away uh, forever. He never came back, and light since then is a keyhole rusting gently after rain. Again, this keyhole is their only source of light and also sort of source to the outside world. Once a day they hear something. There have been deaths. You get in this stanza this sort of establishment of the mushroom's suffering. There have been deaths, nightmares, dominion of stale air and rank moisture. Those nearest the door grow strong and sort of shout out for room or space. The rest dim in a twilight of crumbling utensils, groaning for deliverance. Again, this unbelievable or unbelievably helpless suffering have been so long expectant that there is left only the posture. They're sort of leaning towards the keyhole. You might get some near the keyhole that seem a little bit stronger, but the ones sort of in the back of the room maybe are just kind of leaning slightly towards the keyhole. Look like they've lost a lot of their fight, um, so to speak, and are just kind of leaning towards that thing that they want. A half century without visitors in the dark. Poor preparation for the cracking lock and creak of hinges. Um, I don't know what to do with this powdery prisoners of the old regime. I only say that because I take these magi and moonmen and these words before it, poor preparation for the cracking lock and creak of hinges. The door is going to open, it seems. And all of this suffering, all of this waiting, all of this helplessness has been uh, poor preparation for that. Web-throated, stalked like triffids, racked by drought, only the ghost of a scream at the flashbulb firing squad. Someone's coming in and taking a picture. And by the time they do, um, their reaction is sort of a ghost or a shell of their former selves. We wake them with shows. There's life yet in the feverish forms. Grown beyond nature now, soft food for worms. They lift frail heads in gravity and good faith. Again, this really, I think, a subtle development of their sort of nobility. They're not resentful. They're not entitled. Um, they've just been so close to hopeless for so long. They are begging us, you see, in their wordless way, to do something, to speak on their behalf, or at least not to close the door again. There's all this personification, but this is the stanza where you really take a leap to the metaphor takes a leap, or jumps to um, being slightly more didactic and suggesting what to do. Uh, they're begging us, you see, in their wordless way. Now, this is where I could have done a better job of that. This is where it sort of the metaphor hops from these mushrooms sort of abandoned in this shed to um, think about anybody on the margins or anybody that's abandoned. And he does this really interesting thing where he does it throughout history, um, and not necessarily to forces strictly of neglect or natural disasters you'll see, or even just um, people who have sort of been abandoned. In other words, to a passivity of appeasement, for lack of a better phrase. They are begging us, you see, in their wordless way, to do something, to speak on their behalf, or at least not to close the door again. Referring to the mushrooms, but in this next line, again, it skips to something else. Lost people of Treblinka and Pompeii. Now, Treblinka and Pompeii could not be more different. Um, Treblinka was essentially a death camp in Poland during the Holocaust, and Pompeii, um, oh, middle school history, don't fail me now. Pompeii either was the island itself or was an island off of a volcanic island that essentially gets absolutely decimated. And interestingly, with the metaphor of the shed, has this sort of uh, petrifying preservation to it. Everybody was kind of frozen in place. It seemingly came on so fast um, that I wouldn't know what the technical word is, but people were, solidified in place. I don't know if the right word is calcified or what, but something about the volcanic ash, or I don't even know. But if you look up pictures of it, they all the people are kind of frozen in the moment that they died. Um, and in a way sort of look like that, what we might imagine that room of mushrooms sort of just frozen in place look like. So we have three main images right now, or I want to suggest that we have three main images right now, which is this abandoned shed with these mushrooms sort of abandoned in it, that man is sort of personifying as yearning for deliverance. We have presumably Holocaust victims or survivors, I'm not sure, of Treblinka, probably victims, or victims at any rate, and Pompeii. Um, save us, they seem to say. Let the God not abandon us who have come so far in darkness and in pain. We too had our lives. So I don't always recommend asking this question or asking this question certainly too soon, but if we start to think about what the point of some of this is, we have an answer, sort of tucked away in these lines. To they, these people, these mushrooms, the people that man's asking us to consider here, are begging us in their wordless way to either do something, to speak on their behalf, so action, advocacy, or at least not to close the door again. Don't forget them, at the very least. At the least, not to close the door again. We too had our lives to live. You with your light meter and relaxed itinerary, let not our naive labors have been in vain. Um, this is a really cool couple of lines here, where he gives voice to it's up to you to decide, but any of those three images, the mushrooms in the shed, the victims of Treblinka or Pompeii. Save us, they seem to say. Let the God not abandon us who have come so far in darkness and in pain. We too had our lives to live. You with your light meter and relaxed itinerary, let not our naive labors have been in vain. There's this really neat sort of turn at the end where if you think about how mun, how mundane the image is of this sort of these mushrooms in the shed, he kind of asks us to imagine their private desires, their private hopes, and then makes really beautifully these jumps that don't seem as massive, but really are these massive jumps to these victims of these horrible historical moments. Um, and he asks us again to sort of imagine like their daily lives. We too had our lives to live, he says. You with your light meter and relaxed itinerary. Not only do we have our lives to live, but we did so much of them in darkness and in pain. Our lives presumably were much harder. Um, Let not our naive labors have been in vain. We were just trying to survive. We didn't really know what we were doing. But of course, with historical perspective, which man or the speaker, however you want to say that, brings to the poem, we know that all those victims of the past that were so quick, even people that weren't victims, that just lived and died, that we are so quick to forget, in some universal way paved the road for every comfort of modern life. Um, and again, if you're wondering what to do, it's kind of laid out for you. Do something, speak on their behalf, or at least not to close the door again. Um, and if that sounds like a little too depressing, I want to take it back to the beginning. Even now, there are places where thought might grow. There is this background feeling of hope in this poem. I don't pretend to have this entire thing worked out, or to be able to go line for line and say exactly what man or the speaker or who anybody is supposed to sort of think or feel about this. Um, but there's something about these images being presented in this way that at the very least almost feels meditative. Um, okay, that is a disused shed in County Wexford. Thank you very much.